What's up, everybody? It's your boy Chainsaw, and welcome everyone to Cash, Coffee, and Chaos. If this is your first time joining us on the show, we are a progressive news talk and political commentary show. We talk about a lot of local issues, state, national, and in some cases, international topics that you might not find anywhere else. And in some cases, we have differing opinions on topics that are being discussed elsewhere. Please do not let us be your only source of information, but consider us as one of many reliable opinion options in your daily news feed. We post Monday through Friday. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok at Chainsaw CCC for the most up-to-date commentary. And we would ask that you consider supporting the show on Patreon simply by going to patreon.com/ChainsawCCC and becoming a member. You can support the show for as little as $3 per month. That's less than half the cost of a loaded tea or a caramel latte, right? Caramel latte before inflation, anyway. Listen, we've got a lot to discuss, so let's just jump right into it. So the Texas Republican Party has been super busy this weekend. And while most normal folks were celebrating Father's Day, Juneteenth, it seems that Republicans, at least in the state of Texas, were figuring out how best to celebrate the fatherland, or the Vaterland, for some of those folks. Texas Republicans approve far-right platform declaring Biden's election illegitimate. Yeah, that's a stance now. That's an official stance. The platform, which was voted on at the Republican State Party Convention in Houston, was the latest sign of Texas conservatives moving further to the right. The Republican Party in Texas made a series of far-right declarations as part of its official party platform over the weekend, claiming that President Joe Biden was not legitimately elected, issuing a rebuke to Senator John Cornyn for his work on bipartisan gun legislation and referring to homosexuality as an abnormal lifestyle. And we'll get to John Cornyn here in a bit. The platform was voted on in Houston at the state's party convention, which concluded on Saturday. The resolutions about Mr. Biden and Mr. Cornyn were approved by a voice vote of the delegates, according to James Vasolik, the communications director of the Republican Party of Texas. The statements about homosexuality, as well as an additional stances on abortion, that called for students to learn about the humanity of the preborn child, whatever that means, were among more than 270 planks that were approved by a platform committee and voted on by the larger group of convention delegates using paper ballots. Of course, they're using paper ballots. I'm surprised those folks can read. The results of those votes were still pending on Sunday, but Mr. Vasolik said it was rare for a plank to be voted down by the full convention after being approved by the committee. The resolutions adopting the false claim that former President Donald J. Trump was the victim of a stolen election in 2020, as well as other declarations, were the latest examples of Texas Republicans moving further to the right in recent months. Mr. Vasolik disputed the notion that the declarations were tied to the state party's rightward tilt. That was the will of the body, he said on Sunday. We pride ourselves on being a grassroots party. Jesus Christ. Well, let's find out how grassroots they are here. So Jason Vaughn, 38, a Republican delegate from Houston, claimed credit for adding the show up to vote language in the Biden resolution. He says, "My fear is that if we keep telling people the election was stolen, they're going to not go out and vote," Mr. Vaughn said. And then furthermore, the homosexuality plank passed the platform committee by a vote of 17-14. Who's surprised about that? According to Mr. Vaughn, an openly gay member of the committee who voted against it, it does nothing to move us forward as a party and gain voters, he said in a video of the committee meeting. In an interview, Mr. Vaughn said the shift at the convention was the result of a small number of people who make the process miserable because they want to do all this extreme far right stuff. Well, wait a minute. I thought they said that wasn't the extreme far right. That was just Texas Party is just trying to take us back to a time. One Texas congressman and Democrat Representative Colin Allred called the Republican Party's actions regressive. The Texas Republican Party is trying to take us back to a time when women couldn't make decisions about their own bodies and when Americans lived in fear that they would be punished for being themselves. Yeah, what happened to the party of tax breaks and you know, cutting government spending, right? Well, that's gone. Those days are absolutely gone. And this was furthered in the Washington Post article. Let me pull this up. At Texas GOP conventions, loyalists embrace far-right anti-gay rhetoric. Separately, a party platform presented to convention delegates labeled homosexuality an abnormal lifestyle choice. According to the Texas Tribune, the platform also advocates for children to learn in school about the humanity of the preborn child, promoting new messaging about the state has already taken steps to vastly restrict abortion. And where does this go from here? So the Texas State GOP's official party platform is the Trump one. Being queer is officially abnormal, and taxpayer-funded public schools must not only figure out how to teach the alternative view of the Holocaust, but now also have to figure out curriculum to teach about fetuses. And I guess there's socio-political history or something. I don't know. These people are just sick and twisted. There's no getting around that. So again, with the Washington Post, a Trump campaign documents give inside look at fake elector plan. I found this super fascinating, and I'll just skim through it real quick. The convening of the Electoral College on December 14, 2020 was supposed to mark the end of the wild, extended presidential election that year. But when the day arrived, a strange thing happened. In 7 swing states, 7, won by Joe Biden, when the Democrats' electors assembled to formally elect him president, Trump supporters showed up too, ready to declare that their man had actually won. The electors are already here. They've been checked in, a state police officer told the group in Michigan, according to a video of the encounter, as he barred the Republicans from the Capitol in a state Biden won by more than 150,000 votes. In Nevada, state Biden had won by 33,600 votes. A photo distributed by the state Republican Party showed Trump supporters squeezing around an undersized picnic table, dressed up with a bit of bunting, prepared to sign formal certificates declaring that they were the duly elected and qualified electors of their state. Wow. But internal campaign emails and memos reveal that the convening of the fake electors appeared to be much more of a concerted strategy intended to give Vice President Mike Pence a reason to declare the outcome of the election was somehow in doubt on January 6th, when he was to preside over the congressional counting of the Electoral College votes. The documents show Trump's team pushed ahead and urged the electors to meet, then pressured Pence to cite the alternate Trump slates. Even as various Trump lawyers acknowledged privately that they did not have a legal validity and the gatherings had not been in compliance with state laws. In a public hearing Thursday, the U.S. House investigating the attack on the Capitol January 6th explored the end of the story the pressure campaign placed on Pence to accept the Trump electors as somehow legitimate. Wow. The testimony and evidence presented by the committee will build on an argument it made in a federal court in California, where it successfully obtained a judge's order forcing Trump lawyer John Eastman to turn over the records to the committee. In ordering Eastman to produce documents, federal district court Judge David O'Carter wrote that Eastman and Trump's endeavor amounted to a coup in search of a legal theory. John, what would you think of producing a legal memo outlining the constitutional role of state legislators in designating electors? Conservative activist Cleta Mitchell, another lawyer advising Trump's team, wrote to Eastman 2 days after the November vote. A movement is stirring but needs constitutional support. The notion that the state legislatures could choose electors in defiance of voters would be a radical one in modern American history, but the documents show Trump's strategists quickly began to pursue the theory, especially as lawyers for the campaign and allied groups racked up losses in court cases that they had urged judges to hear expeditiously before the electors could meet. And there you go, folks. I mean, I strongly urge you to read the rest of the article there. Of course, there would be irregularities if those red states had sent alternative electors. I mean, what once seemed like a kooky conspiracy theory on the left is now starting to not only seem like it holds water, but we have the evidence and testimony to prove otherwise. Isn't the right always talking about the globalish and whatnot, and yet the multi-state organization of teams of alternative Trump electors? I mean, CPAC Hungary, where Fash authoritarian regimes, leaders and press people are speaking to the American Republican voter. Come on, what do you call this then? What more do you want, folks? We'll see how this plays out. And what else we're missing is the next January 6th committee hearing is scheduled for Tuesday. That's tomorrow. Tuesday, June 21st is going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern. Join us here as we'll be live streaming the entire thing. So you want to set your phones to 1 p.m. Eastern and set your faces to stunned. You definitely don't want to miss it. So there's been a lot of talk lately about gun bans and the Second Amendment rights. The liberals obviously want to take your guns and blah, 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 right? One topic that Republicans don't want their base or the average voter to know is what's at stake here. And where the conversation has shifted in Washington to the boyfriend loophole. What's the boyfriend loophole, you ask? Let's take a look. CNN reports the boyfriend loophole deals with whether unmarried, and you don't trust CNN. I get that. Google it. I'm not your mom. I'm not your boss. I'm not your lawyer or your CPA. I'm neither a lawyer or a CPA. The boyfriend loophole deals with whether unmarried partners can have guns if they're found guilty of violence against a dating partner. Federal law currently only bars people from purchasing a firearm if they're convicted of domestic violence while living with a partner, married to their partner, have a child with their partner. Democratic lawmakers have long sought to expand the law to extend that coverage to dating partners, convicted stalkers, and any individual under a protective order. But as of now, it doesn't seem to other types of dating partners, it doesn't apply to other types of dating partners, hence the label boyfriend loophole, right? Now, closing the loophole would mean anyone who is deemed to have been in a serious dating relationship and convicted of domestic violence would no longer be eligible to own a gun. This makes sense. What does research tell us? Supporters of closing the boyfriend loophole have repeatedly pointed to data that they say underscores the need to address it. Two separate but related studies worth reading. One, an average of 70 women are killed by an intimate partner with a firearm every month. According to an analysis of U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention data by Everytown for Gun Safety. And two, access to a gun led to a notable increase in the risk of a woman being killed in a relationship with a history of domestic violence, according to a 2003 study funded by the National Institute of Health. More broadly, another study by Everytown for Gun Safety found that there is a direct correlation in states with weaker gun laws and higher rates of gun deaths, including homicides, suicides, accidental killings. The nonprofit organization's analysis put California at the top of the list for gun law strength, with a composite score at 84.5 out of 100, with a low rate of 8.5 gun deaths per 100,000 and below the national average of 13.6. Hawaii has the lowest rate of gun deaths in the country, firearms in 9% of the households. Have any states closed the loophole? At least 19 states have enacted laws that close the boyfriend loophole. This includes California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, Nebraska, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Washington, and West Virginia. So if your state's not on the list, hey, other states like Alabama, Colorado, and Iowa prohibit convicted domestic abusers from having guns, but don't specifically close the loophole. So if your state's not on that list, hey, what's the hang-up? In their framework, lawmakers agreed to extend the prohibition on buying firearms to those who were convicted of domestic violence, who are in a serious dating relationship, even if they're married or meet other criteria, but defining what kind of relationship would fit has been a point of debate within the group. There's also been disagreement over whether there should be an opportunity for people who were convicted of misdemeanors to restore their ability to buy a gun, or own a gun down the line. And, I'll just take a page right out of Asa Hutchinson's book, right? The guy illegalizes abortions in the state of Arkansas, puts one of these laws in place just in case the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, right? Didn't leave anything in there for rape or incest. But you know what? He's planning on taking care of that as soon as it, comes up, right? Like, they'll get to that. I trust Asa Hutchinson. Like, why don't other Republicans trust that? You tell me. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Because that's weird. But defining what kind of relationship would fit has been a point of debate within the group. There's been disagreement over whether there should be an opportunity for people who are convicted of misdemeanors to restore their ability to buy a gun or own a gun down the line. Cornyn said last week they were discussing whether a misdemeanor conviction for a partner could be enough to take away that individual's guns, and how to define a domestic partner. Describing the hang-up, the Texas Republican said on Wednesday, the issue has to do with the way that non-traditional relationships are handled in terms of domestic violence and misdemeanors. We've got to come up with a good definition of what that actually means. He added, what this does is it would add a category to a bar for people being able to purchase a firearm if they fall in that category. So it's got to be clear, and it's got to be something that can actually be applied, because we're talking about pretty serious consequences associated with that. And, again, that's something that they could deal with on down the line, right? Wait. Before we get into that. Why do gun groups oppose closing it? Well, profit. Do I even really need to look at this? The NRA, other pro-firearms groups have long opposed closing the boyfriend loophole, casting it as an attempt by Democrats to advance gun control agenda. Early this year, the NRA lobbied aggressively and successfully to keep any legislation addressing the loophole out of the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. Right. So, following news of the bipartisan gun safety agreement last week, the NRA said it will continue to oppose any effort to insert gun control policies, initiatives that override constitutional due process protections, and efforts to deprive law-abiding citizens of their fundamental right to protect themselves and their loved ones. Yeah, I thought we just went over that with the law-abiding shit. Obviously, that doesn't count. How come the NRA isn't fighting so hard for felons to own firearms? I'm just saying, why is that the one thing that's taboo? Bo the Fifth Column actually put it so eloquently when he said something to the effect of, if someone hit your sister or your ex-girlfriend or your cousin, what would you say? Or what would you want to do to that person? It's a horrible, horrible Bo. But I mean, if you're a Republican voter, then more than likely, whatever it is that you thought of doing to that person who hit your girlfriend or your ex-girlfriend or your sister, your cousin, or your mom, or your grandma, auntie, whoever, right? Whatever it is that you would say about that person, whatever it is that you would want to do to whatever it is that you would do to that person is probably much worse than keeping them away from guns, right? If you're going to be doing anything that's real bad, you probably don't want them to have a gun. I'm just saying. So why is it that you would think that, or would do that to someone who hit your female relation or whatever kind, but keeping firearms from them is just crossing the line? I think he put it a bridge too far. Why is it so important for someone who's convicted of domestic violence to have a gun? It's a great question. Why is it more important to you, the voter, that someone who hits a woman should have a gun, but someone who sells a little bit of weed 30, 40 years ago, maybe, they can't own a gun? I mean, these Second Amendment people are silent when it comes to felons accessing firearms because, that just makes too much sense. It's behavioral. So, I mean, I guess there's that. But meanwhile, when the NRA tells, folks that they, tells people, what they want them to believe, I mean, they don't need a reason. They just react. That's just a really weird take to me, and a display of where the average Republican voter is if they support this kind of trash coming from within their party. Don't make horrible faces. Someone will screen catch that. There we go. Lastly, before I want to go to break, I want to give an update on the police shooting death of Patrick Lyoya. Probably mispronouncing that. You may recall that back in April, there's a video that surfaced released by Grand Rapids Police. Well, there were a couple videos that it came out with Officer Christopher Shore. He pulled over a vehicle driven by Lyoya. The driver was asked, the driver asked what he'd done, said something to the passenger, and then began walking, he shuts the door and begins walking slowly to the front of the car. When the officer, immediately just starts yelling, no, grabs him, obviously escalating the situation, grabbing him, pulling on him, trying to put his hands behind his back, told him to put his hands behind his back. And then Lyoya tried to get away from Shore, at which point there was a scuffle. At no point in any of the video, did it seem like the driver acted aggressively, defensively, yes, but in no way aggressively toward the officer. Obviously, the officer couldn't we'll get to that. Obviously, the officer could not handle the guy. So if he had acted aggressively toward him, we would be telling a completely different story here today. But that didn't stop him from tackling the guy, or at least trying to tackle him, climbing on top of him. At one point, was on his back. The guy is on his hands and knees, picks himself up with the cop on his back, shrugs the cop off, right? Meanwhile, the cop's trying to overpower him, which he obviously failed to do. Lyoya seemed to ask, what did I do? He turns around, at which point the officer, tried to tase him. He fired the taser twice. He screamed, let go of the taser, as he's trying to defensively push the taser away from himself because he doesn't want to get tased, right? And he's asking, what did I do? And then after climbing back on top of the guy, he pulls out his service pistol while Lyoya was on his hands and knees and shoots him in the back of the head, causing his body to go limp. At least that's what's in the official police report. That's what's in several of the videos that are available online. I strongly, if you haven't seen it yet and you're over the age of reason, strongly urge you to take a look at that. Make your own decisions. Of course, we all expected that the officer's actions would be considered justified in his use of force, which is what typically happens, and apparently, which is what former Officer Christopher Shore's lawyer is also saying, as he surprisingly is being charged with second-degree murder. So, again, there are several videos of this incident online, so if you haven't seen any of them yet, I would strongly urge you to take a look. You're not prepared. I'll just put it that way. But yeah, listen, we're going to take a short break and jump right back into it.